walk out to the show and fall at your door. We got that info for you. Touchdown on that plane and fly in a plane. More than just a podcast for you.
The next question. A lot of parents, when they think of going to college, they're thinking about a full ride. Um, do college soccer players get a full ride?
Kurt,
Yes.
you've had some college coaching experience, right? So
Yes, I think it really depends on the level. Like if we're talking about Division three, we know that they can't give athletic scholarships, so more you're going to get more of the academic kind of student athlete or soccer player that you're looking for in Division three. It doesn't mean that the level's bad. It means actually the level in some Division three programs is very good. Um, you know, uh, but they don't give athletic scholarships, but they have other ways of getting around that in terms of leadership stuff and academic that they can put a very good package together. I think nowadays it is harder and harder to get a full ride. I think with that and Intel, because you're trying to put a roster of 26 guys together, and a lot of these are 9.9. Scholarships is all they have. So if you have to try to take that, and whether you add some academic money, and then you add some soccer money to it, there's very few that are going to get full rides. That's what I always tell my student athletes here is, man, there's so much more money in academics. Spend more time on that than the soccer part. And then what they'll do is especially a lot of the schools will stack. That means that they will give you a lot of academic money, and then they'll stack whatever you need left. Then they take that out of their soccer budget. So it's really trying to find those student athletes slash soccer players that can do both, that that academically are going to be very good, but also they can play at a very high level. So you're not spending all of your money out of your soccer budget or your scholarships for that one player or two players, because you're not going to have a roster of 26 players if you're giving everyone a full ride. It's just not going to end up. You're going to have a very small roster that you may not even have 11 to play. So I think it's that catch 22 of making sure that that you're really spending time on the academics, because that's free money. Like that's what we say, it's free money. You need to make sure you spend time on it, and then a lot of the colleges are going to fill in with whatever they need to in terms of athletic money, in terms of soccer scholarship, and they can stretch that out. Would be my advice, is making sure that you're not only doing the things you need to do on the soccer field, in terms of club, those kind of things, but also making sure you're spending a lot of time in the classroom.
Tucker, what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think there's that much to add. You got the expert there. Yeah, it's I guess maybe touch on a little bit more like from level to level, right? As Curtis mentioned, like the D3 they can't offer athletic scholarships. D2 they can, but I mean his message was pretty clear, right? Coaches aren't gonna give out full rides. Otherwise, they're just not gonna have enough money to go around to the rest of their team. They have to build a full roster, right? So they're going to take fractions of a full ride, divvy it up between 2-3 players, try to get academic money. That whole thing comes into play. But yeah, I've met like maybe 3 guys out of my out of my life who have had full rides. It's just a very uncommon thing. It's somebody who's usually highly talented, who's coming from a poor socioeconomic status, who can't who just purely can't afford college, but has who's smart enough to probably make it and pass all his classes, but somebody who's going to be very highly valued on the pitch. So
But did you get a full ride at the academy?
yeah, that's another thing I guess I forgot to add. So unique experience, going to any one of the service academies, you get a full ride. So right, but you have to commit. I did forget about that exception. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, but obviously you're going to be committed for obviously if you commit your junior year, you're going to owe service, 5 years of active duty service after you graduate. And so my path to be able to play professionally has been tiresome at sometimes, you know, trying to figure out a lot on my end. But I was able to find a program that would let me pursue that for the time being. But yeah, luckily enough, I am not in debt. Don't have any student loans. So happy about that.
So parents, I want to point out something, and this is crucial, and you did not hear it from me. Different sports have different ways of divvying up money. A lot of parents are familiar with football or basketball, and they think, oh, one kid, one scholarship. So you're hearing that it is not one kid, one scholarship in all sports. The same thing in terms of levels applies. Some levels are allowed to give athletic money, others are not. But just know that I'm not crazy when I tell you this. You have 4 different people, 4 different situations, and they're letting you know. I'm giving you the real information. Full rides are very hard to come by, and you should expect proportion as opposed to 100%. However, service academies are the actual difference. You do get a full ride if you choose to go to one of the service academies. Thanks for highlighting that, gentlemen. Sometimes I have to let parents know, like, I'm not crazy. I promise it's not what you think. So it's great for them to hear it from you guys. So next question. Can you go play professional soccer right out of high school? And if you can, what's the advantage of playing soccer in college versus going professional right away?
You can play professional like around the world, and it's starting to happen a little bit here that kids are signing professional contracts at 16, 18 years old. You know, because once you get into, you know, post college for some of the other academies and some of the other professional teams, depending on where you went, you've missed a lot of years of professional experience. So in Europe and some of the other countries, they try and identify kids at a younger age to bring them into a professional environment, so they can be a quote unquote professional. It's very rare in this country for that to happen. And that happens in other places, probably more so for what a strange term would be for any of your listeners is for solidarity payments. Because the professional teams in other countries actually pay money to the youth program that helped develop the player. So they're basically giving back money and resources to that program. So for example, like if Jacob's club team helped develop him for a certain amount of years and he then signed on to be a professional, that professional team would then give his club money for him for all the work that they put in to develop him. So what clubs do is they try and, you know, what's a little bit different in probably Europe and other places is they focus on development of the player individually. Whereas a lot of times in the US, we're looking at how many wins that you have, and wins and losses. Whereas in Europe, if we can find, you know, this one player, right? We can find Tucker, who's going to be like this phenomenal professional, and we paid his club team this much because the return for him being on our team is going to be far more, but we're paying those coaches for their development. So, I mean, it's pretty rare for people to go professional at a young age, straight out of high school, especially in the United States, because, you know, there isn't a lot of money in soccer in the US. So, you know, you're kind of better off going to college and getting some more experience and coming out with your degree, because unless you're making, you know, a pretty good salary on an MLS contract, you're probably going to need another job anyway to be able to play professionally, right, Tucker? Right?
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, so you better be a professional at something, right? Like, so you have, you know, you can have a business degree, or, you know, you can you can make extra money in the off season and stuff like that. You can still be a pro, but you know, a lot of players, you know, if they didn't, you know, especially, and this is some of my European friends, like they didn't sign a professional contract by 18. They were then trying to come to the US to get a scholarship to get schooling, because that's where they knew they were going to make their money.
Wow, that's very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, it's very different.
Right.
America has it very different from every other country.
Yeah.
I'm not even, like, my mind is completely blown. Like, wow, they're coming to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Oh, parents, if you're listening, the money's different in soccer. The money is different in soccer, and it's different in soccer in Europe versus the United States. Like, I'm like listening to you talk about a European club paying, well, a European team playing a player's club, and I'm thinking violation, violation, violation. Wow, that's super different. I'm like,
It's not really considered a violation if the kid goes pro, right?
I'm just
So,
like,
you know, when you get into like college football, even though there's big money in it, they're still not professional yet, right? So when you look at, you know, LeBron, who went straight from high school to pro, you know, there was not quote unquote real violation if somebody gave him money for stuff, right? Because he was going pro anyway. Right?
no, because like legally for a minute, you couldn't go pro right out of college, but now they changed the rule. Basketball again, but football, you don't legally, you don't have the option. And it's very, like, so my mind, I'm like, wow, like the world is very different in soccer, extremely different. I have so many questions that y'all don't have time to answer. Based on so many questions. Wow.
Yeah.
My
No,
mind is
JT pretty much covered.
my mind is completely blown. I'm like, wow, that's a whole different world. Parents, we're definitely going to have them back, because I know we have tons and tons of questions now, tons and tons of questions. But before I do the last question of the day, anyone else want to weigh in? I know JT was thorough, but anyone else want to weigh in?
I would just say that you will see a lot of D1 schools probably saving some of those scholarships for those international guys that, like JT was talking about, that are trying to come over. At least in my experience, that's what a lot of D1 schools around the Nashville area were doing. So, but it makes sense, you know, because they've got the experience and they're willing to come over and play. So,
Yeah.
Ooh, let me write this down. I'm trying not to take us down on a tangent. I've got questions. I totally have questions, because like, okay, I will just like little, but I said I want to be respectful of your time. Like, if I think that this is huge for parents in the US to understand that you're not just competing against other kids in the United States, that they're like the idea that you would hold a certain number of scholarships for international players because you know that there's a different level of development. Yeah, the whole wins versus professional money, that's huge. I've got so many questions, but I will be mindful of the fact that I do want you guys to come back. And so last question of the day. Why don't we see more soccer clubs in urban areas? And why in the US is soccer perceived as a suburban sport? I think about, like, even in politics, it's a thing where they talk about the suburban soccer moms and attracting them to different political candidates. So, like, why is that in the United States? Don't all jump in?
I live that on a daily basis, like trying to provide opportunities for kids out of the city. And, you know, we do a lot. It kind of comes down to probably funding and access to resources. You know, in the cities, there's very little green space in a lot of places. So where do you actually put a field, right? And you know, even when there are these turf fields and stuff that are put in cities, you know, they're there also too to kind of like make money, right? So those get rented out to like the social groups and the professional, you know, frisbee, you know, leagues and all those things, right? So then the kids that probably need the access to it, you know, there's a small window of time when they can get on it because they're not coming in and bringing money to the table to be able to maintain that field and keep the lights on and stuff like that. So, you know, we do a lot of like grant writing and looking for sponsorships and all those kinds of things and trying to expose kids to the game and even telling them that's a good fundamental sport for other sports, you know, like, you know, there's a lot of, I think all of us have tried to dabble in basketball a little bit. And I think we were probably a lot better at it because of the footwork stuff that came with soccer, as opposed to, you know, how bad we probably would have been if we didn't play soccer. But I think it's just access to resources, you know, the fields and all that other stuff are kind of in the suburbs. These large tournaments and stuff are, you know, you got to travel, you got to spend the night, you know, entry fees, you know, uniforms cost, all like that, you know, and because you get a better bang for your buck, like Curtis said, with playing for a club, you know, the high schools aren't really, you know, a lot of them don't have great coaching backgrounds and stuff like that. They don't have people like Kurt who are at the high school who can teach them the game. It's usually the, you know, the science teacher who wants to make a couple extra bucks, right? So he coaches soccer. So the resources are kind of taken out of the, you know, out of the kind of free sector, which would come with the school, and they're all pushed into the club sector. So I think, you know, well, I see every day that, you know, we run out of money trying to support our kids in the city to be able to play. And we usually run in in-house leagues, or we get in leagues where they'll let our team play for free, but just referee costs, you know, for one game, you're looking at like maybe even close to $150 just for 3 refs who parents and people are probably going to yell at anyway for bad calls. But straight out, and it's, you know, straight out the door, it ends up being that there's just, for as cheap as a sport should be, you need a ball, some space. And I remember Tucker talking about a makeshift ball in some places, you know, to be able to play the game. But unfortunately, in this country, for you to be able to play at a high level, you got to pay for a coach, you got to pay for a facility, you got to pay to participate in leagues and tournaments. And when you look at cost versus, you know, return, if I got 3 or 4 kids, you know, maybe I'm a, you know, single parent, something like that. If I got 4 kids playing soccer on a yearly basis on a top club team, it could cost me somewhere around $10,000 just for them to just play. And why do you look at that, who has that really to just give to a game, you know, and you say, hey, go outside and play, right? You can do that for free, right? Like you go outside and play for free, right? But if I want them to play in the system, you know, and we tell people sometimes in the club system, you know, they'll come to me and say, hey, JT, can you train my kid individually? I'll pay you $100 an hour. I say, listen, you know, what are your expectations? If your expectations are for them to get a full ride because of this training that I can give them, from now until that point when they graduate, if you'd have saved $100 an hour and tucked it away for their college, you probably would have paid for it. So what's your return? So, you know, I think it's because of I'm just passionate about urban soccer.
Hey, this is what the question's for.
You know, but it is that the resources are probably in the suburbs, or the suburban people have the resources to be able to pay for the experience.
All right, guys, don't all be shy.
Well, I'll say something we have here. We have a group that was under one of the professional clubs that started a foundation called Get Active, and what they did is they actually went into inner city schools after school. They would go to them and provide them a snack after school, and then they would play, like a 30-minute to an hour of soccer. They would just roll out the ball and play, and but they again, it comes down to money because they had funding. It's a foundation. They had to go out and find the money to be able to offer these things because the snacks aren't free, as we know, and the equipment's not free. The transportation to go to actually where they are isn't free. And I think that's the you start to see it in I wish we had more communities that would be willing to do that, because I think everyone looks at it the other way of, I'm spending $6,000 to $10,000. What am I going to get at the very end? Because there's not even a guarantee that you're going to get a soccer scholarship after you do pay the $10,000 a year or $6,000 a year, as it is here. Like here, it's $6,000 a year to play club. So if you start taking that money and adding up, like JT is saying, then you could pay for a nice school that you could go to. But I think for me, it all comes down to having people like JT that are passionate, that are going into those places, that are trying to help out, that are willing to volunteer their time. I admire what JT is doing to try to get it, but to me, it still comes down to the money aspect of it. And even, in other countries, I always say that we get it backwards. If you're the best player in a different country, you're paying nothing. You are paying nothing. They're going to find you and you are going to be taken care of. Like the Leon Messi's, they found him, Barcelona. He paid nothing. I know he was in a professional environment, but Messi basically paid nothing to play. Over here, it's the opposite. The better you are, the more you have to pay, because you have to travel and you have to pay for the club fees and the transportation fees and all that stuff, and they all add up. And I think that's one reason why we don't have as many players that are playing, because it is a money issue, but it shouldn't be. Now, how to solve that problem, I'll leave that up to JT and support him in any way I can. I love what he's doing. Like I said, for here, it's really great to see this Get Active program that's taken off from the ground, that now they've gone to like 8 different elementary schools after school to be able to feed them and to be able to play soccer. And then at the very end of the year, they have a big tournament where they bring all the teams together. But again, you're paying transportation for them to get on a bus to be able to come over there, get them back, back to school so the parents can pick them up. To me, it comes down to money. And we have to do a better job of finding a way to fund those things, because any kid that wants to play should have an opportunity to play. Cost should not be a part of it.
I just think that I want to point out, parents, he said $6,000 a year to play club. Wow. Wow. I just had to throw that out there. Tucker, Jacob, thoughts?
I think these two guys nailed it. Not too much to add, but it is a time. Playing club, whether it's urban or suburban, it takes a lot of money, a lot of time, and not everybody has that, and not everybody has the space to play, in the middle of the city. But that being said, there are a few players that have come from cities that I've either played with or against that are some of the best players. So, the opportunity is there in those urban areas. We just need resources like JT provides, and like Get Active, that can reach those kids.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't want to get away from the question too much, but ultimately the resources in a lot of these other countries where soccer is more prominent and doing better, the infrastructure is there and the money's there, and like JT was saying and Curtis was saying, like those players that in over in Europe who are younger and who have talent are going to be well taken care of, and they'll be brought into that system. And the professional club and all the money that they have and that they're making from their first team, is reaching out to these communities and providing that infrastructure. And that's just what we're lacking here in the States, right? Our teams and our leagues that are making the most money are the NFL and the NBA, and the MLB, right? And it's almost saddening to see that they're not doing a better job at creating an infrastructure, reaching out to these communities, right? And I guess it comes down to the college system, right? They rely on the NCAA to create to create an infrastructure that they can just pick and pull from with no cost, right? I haven't like looked into that at all, but I'm pretty sure these leagues don't really pay the NCAA anything, and they're all in it for the money, and these owners are making a lot of money off their players and merchandising and all these things, and it's kind of sad not to see them reaching out to the communities, and that's really only a thing that has been a thing in foreign nations with soccer. Soccer's the sport that has sort of created that type of culture where you set up an infrastructure for your youth to be able to pull talent from wherever it may be. And we're in the very beginning stages of that here in the United States. MLS just started doing this recently with their academies, finding these players, providing that infrastructure where you don't have to pay. And we actually, I believe, recently saw that academies collapsed due to the recent pandemic, which is another thing that we're going to have to get past to be able to get that infrastructure and start providing it for everybody, the means to play.
As we wrap up, I want to call out to parents two things that I have heard that we haven't had this. Maybe when we had the conversation about baseball, it may have been similar, but I have distinctly heard that in urban areas, urban planning impacts soccer. There has to be green space, and there has to be an agreement that the green space doesn't necessarily have to generate revenue for the urban area. And until JT really walked us through it, I didn't understand that impact that urban planning has actually on soccer, because that's huge. That's really big. I want to say thank you guys so much for agreeing to do the show. I have learned a ton. I've got questions for the future. But as we wrap up, just thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge. And to our listeners, I want to thank you once again for tuning in to another 10 for YouTube show. Again, this is just our first foray into soccer. We will do this again. We will definitely do this again. Thank you guys so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.